Welcome back to 10 Essentials for Musicians. Today we talk about key signatures and scales, and that will wrap up our second major topic, which is traditional notation. When we create these major scales that we were talking about in the last video, they come in certain patterns. Now, I had drawn them as building blocks in the last video, but they aren't in fact equal-sized blocks for each scale degree. Some are actually bigger than others. The bigger ones are called whole steps, and the smaller ones are called half steps. And a whole step is the equivalent of 2 half steps. You can see them in a MIDI events layout or a Lego stack. A major scale is made up of certain patterns of these whole and half steps. There are 2 half steps to be specific, and they're found in a particular place. That might be confusing on a piano keyboard because all the black and white keys come in different orders, or even in guitar fretboard, but as far as patterns of whole and half steps, it's really quite simple. They all look like this: whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Pattern's even easier to remember than that if you learn it this way. There are 2 tetrachords. Tetra meaning 4. There are 2 combinations of 4 notes. They're disjunct by a whole step, and each tetrachord in the pattern, it has a pattern of whole, whole, half. That's all you have to know. There's a note, and then you go up a whole step, and a half step. And then the other tetrachord, you do the same thing. There's a note, and then a whole, and a half. So just remember whole, whole, half. That's what a major scale is made up of. You put a whole step in between 2 tetrachords, and that's a major scale. 7 pitches covering an octave. If you play from C to C on the white keys of the piano, it all works out just fine. Now, don't ask why we start on a C and not an A. That's a long story. But a major scale is simply following all the white keys, C to C. End of story. No sharps, no flats, because there are no black keys. But when I try to play that same pattern starting on an F, for example, the scale sounds slightly different. Right at the point where I get to the 4th scale degree, it sounded too high, too happy, so we have to lower it, make it flat. As they used to say, we have to soften it and use a black key, which is called a B flat. Well, now my scale sounds right, but we have to use a B flat every time it comes up in order to keep it sounding right here in the key of F. When we write out the music, we could add a flat every time that a B comes up. They used to call it musica ficta, or false music, because it seemed like a mistake every time. But eventually it would be good if, because we're in the key of F, we simply put a label on the left side of the line and have that count for the entire line. So I put a B flat on the left side here, and now the label is not a B, but a B flat. We started and ended this scale of F, and we call the key signature with 1 B flat the key signature of F major, because it's the only major scale that needs exactly 1 B flat in it to sound right. Just as the key of C has no sharps or flats, it's the only scale that works that way. Now let's start on G and try it again. So we go through the scale of G. We start playing whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Something didn't sound right there. It didn't sound too happy this time. It sounded too sad. Yeah, too low. So the first half sounded good, whole, whole, half. It was the second half that went whole, half, whole. That was the problem. So if we make that F an F sharp every time, then we have the G major scale, and it all works out. So once again, we go through the same system. We write out the scale, and we can add an F sharp every time that an F comes up, or we can put it on the left side and always do that. Now, it's actually predictable, the order of the sharps and flats. They never go out of order. So you start with a B flat. That's always the first one. If you have a second flat, that's an E flat. If you have a third one, that's an A. And if you have a fourth one, that's a D. And if you notice, to help you remember, that's the word bead, B-E-A-D. That's the order of the flats. And they're written on there like that. There are 3 more notes, and that's G, C, and F. So B, E, A, D, G, C, F. Likewise, there's a certain order of sharps that comes, and that's F, C, G, D, A, E, B. If you look at that, it is the order of flats backwards. Yeah, okay, B, E, A, D, G, C, F, backwards. So if you just remember bead G, C, F, and then you count it forwards or backwards, it all works. Now, when we do flats, the way that you can sort of remember, like how many flats is the key of E flat or whatever it might be, well, you find out how many sharps or flats are in the scale. If let's say there are 3, that would be B, E, A, right? The key of what that would be called would always be the letter name of what is just to the left of the final flat. So B, E, A, it would be E that would be the key. The key of E has 1, 2, 3 flats in it. If you had 4 flats, it would be the key of A flat. Just a little way to remember how those work. The circle of sharps is the right-hand sharp is always 1/2 step below the name of the key. So if there was 2 sharps and the right-hand sharp was a C sharp, that would be the key of D. If there was just 1 sharp, of course, that's the key of G. So it's a 1/2 step below that. That's 2 different ways to remember that. If we try this with the note E, like, well, I don't know if it's got sharps or flats, let's just try it. So we start on an E, we go whole step, 1/2 step. And then we start a new tetrachord, it will go whole step, 1/2 step. That pattern of whole and 1/2 steps is all going to sound right, just right here. Now we count how many flats or sharps. Well, it was 1, 2, 3, 4 sharps, and then we have to put them in order, F, C, G, and D. 4 sharps on the scale. The right-hand sharp, let's see, is a D sharp. Sure enough, that works. Okay. So that's the key of E major. So what we have covered right here is, I like to think of 3 different ways of identifying a scale. The first one is this pattern of whole, whole, and half. There are 2 tetrachords, and they're whole, whole, half, and then a whole step in between, and then whole, whole, half. You can build a scale that way, and then figure out how many sharps or flats were a part of that. The second way that you can do it is you can follow this formula of, well, if it's the key of whatever, then what if I go B, E, A, D, G, C, F with flats, what would lead me to that? Or if I go, let's see, if it's the key of A, then the right-hand sharp would be a G sharp, just a 1/2 step below that, and so therefore it would be F, C, G. That would be 3 sharps. Okay, so I follow that formula. The third system that we kind of introduced here is we have what we call a circle of fourths or a circle of fifths. When you go clockwise around this circle, each one of these letters is a 1/5 above the one before it. If you go to the left, each one is a 1/4 above. That's the order of flats or the order of sharps. And if you just kind of memorize the circle of fifths, as they often refer to it, then you can figure out either sharps or flat. So there you have it. That's key signatures and scales. If you think you've got it, go ahead and take the quiz and demonstrate your proficiency.